My Hero Academia, the superhero anime and manga that took the world by storm. In this world full of heroes, mutants, and villains, about more than half of the world's population have developed extraordinary skills called quirks, each one with its own unique powers and capabilities which they are then able to use in their everyday lives. Some quirks can be as simple as being able to levitate small objects towards you, while others are much more powerful and have much more devastating effects like brainwashing and being able to control elements like fire or water. In classic superhero formula, people with stronger quirks than most can choose to use their powers for good, while others lean more towards the darker side. But whether hero or villain, My Hero Academia is full of many powerful quirks and users, not only among the pro heroes and the League of Villains, but even students from UA have quirks that are able to hold their own in battles against enemies and formidable abilities. Today we count down some of the toughest, most hard-to-beat quirks that some may even call overpowered. These quirks are just so intense and powerful that it's unfair. Though each power is not without its drawbacks, these quirks set themselves apart from the rest not only because of their raw strength, but because of the control and finesse that each user exhibits to wield their powers effectively. We're Cosplay-FTW, and this is the top 10 most overpowered My Hero Academia quirks. Sit back, relax, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. Date ba yo! Fair warning, there will be spoilers for major anime plot points ahead, so be warned and go and catch up before you take a crack at this list. And without further ado, let's dive in. Starting at number 10, we have Brainwashing. Wielded by Hitoshi Shinso of UA General Department, the quirk allows its user to take control of other people and command them to do whatever he wants. The catch is that he can only brainwash them when the other person responds to something he says. Shinso has shown good strategy in getting other people to fall for his trap, as shown when he faces off against Midoriya during the sports festival arc. And he's even able to put multiple people under his control all at the same time. Mind control and brainwashing is a classic superpower whose limits are only ever defined by the user's imagination. Getting others to do your bidding has plenty of uses against enemies, as you can not only stop a fight before it begins, but even incapacitate stronger foes, much like Eraserhead's own quirk, Erasure. If used in the right situation and against the right opponents, Shinso's brainwashing is a frightening quirk to encounter, but of course the catch means having to actually try and make conversation with your opponents. And even more challenging, actually making your opponent talk back, which could work great against villains who love to monologue, but not so much against the more silent villains or enemies who know about the quirk's power. Shinso himself knows the limitations of his own abilities, and when up against foes with physically stronger quirks, his quirk could be rendered ineffective. In fact, his quirk seems much more suited for support than actual offensive combat, which ultimately lands him in the bottom rung. But make no mistake, Shinso's brainwashing is not something to be underestimated, and when developed even further and used right, it could make one hell of an overpowered quirk. At number 9, we have Whirlwind. This quirk belongs to Inasa Yoarashi from Shiketsu High, and under his skillful usage, it makes for an intimidating quirk indeed. Whirlwind allows Inasa to take control of the air around him, and we do mean all of the air. As the name itself suggests, he's able to create whirlwinds, tornadoes, and gusts of wind strong enough to blow his enemies away, figuratively and literally. He can also propel himself in all directions using the wind and pick up heavy objects. The mobility this quirk grants Inasa also makes him a particularly evasive and hard target to hit, as well as allows him to deflect any attacks aimed at him. At first glance, Whirlwind seems like a good all-around offensive and defensive quirk that can be hard to counter. But as with every quirk, it has its weaknesses. When up against quirks like Todoroki's flame-based one, Whirlwind's airflow becomes compromised, and without any air to manipulate, Whirlwind can even be rendered useless. In short, cut off the source of its power, then you cut off the power itself. This limits Whirlwind's uses, though admittedly not by much, and you definitely have to be careful about which enemies to pick a fight with. Overall, Whirlwind is great as an all-around offensive quirk and has plenty of perks to make up for its downfalls, and it definitely gives Inasa the makings of a pro hero. Moving on to number 9, we have Manifest. Perhaps one of the more unique quirks of the My Hero Academia universe, this quirk is used by Tamaki Amajiki, a third-year student of UA and one of the big 3. This quirk allows Amajiki to take on the physical traits of whatever he eats as long as they're still in his digestive system. He's able to turn his limbs into the tentacles of an octopus or use clamshells as defensive shields. He can even manifest the wings and talons of a bird, and his ability isn't limited to normal food either, as literally anything he can eat and digest can be manifested. Not only does this give Amajiki a wide array of attacks and defenses limited only by what he chooses to eat, but he can even use them all at once, oftentimes combining one trait with another, such as reinforcing his tentacles with crab shells or giving himself multiple alterations, such as when he uses his Chimera abilities. But unlike most quirks, Manifest does require a lot of preparation before it can be used to its maximum potential. Things like the amount of food to be ingested and the time it takes to completely digest that food are important factors that can affect Manifest's performance. Were Amajiki to starve or run out of food to eat, or even finish digesting the food he's eaten beforehand, he'd also run out of things to manifest. You are what you eat with this ability, and when your stomach is empty, this quirk is practically useless. But Amajiki is nothing if not careful, and he makes sure that he's well stocked before every mission, snacking on clams and takoyaki nearly every day just in case. But while Manifest is limited by its user's own digestive system, it's certainly a quirk to look out for. Who knows what kind of things you could do with just the right ingredients. Coming up at number 7, we have Explosion. Used by the oh-so-lovable Katsuki Bakugo, Explosion is a powerful quirk that ignites and creates explosions using a nitroglycerin-like substance that Bakugo secretes from his hands. It's a fitting quirk for one as aggressive and hot-tempered as Bakugo, as its raw strength and power is nothing to joke about. The more sweat is created, the stronger and more destructive the explosion, making it an ideal offensive weapon. Explosion is not only powerful enough to destroy anything in its path, but the impact and momentum from the blast can even propel Bakugo forward at faster speeds than normal. Combined with Bakugo's top physical condition and stamina, as well as the pure unrivaled rage that fuels him, Explosion is a quirk you definitely don't want to go up against in a one-on-one fight. In fact, any fight against Bakugo, save for a notable few, ends up being a very one-sided, as Explosion is enough to overwhelm plenty of his opponents. It's no wonder Bakugo was able to win the sports festival by a landslide, hitting a road bump only when faced against Todoroki's more versatile fire and ice powers, though he still manages to score a win. However, like with Inasa's Whirlwind, Explosion is weak to its own elemental opposite, which is, in this case, ice or cold. In colder weather, Bakugo sweats less and thereby creates less powerful explosions. Moreover, the quirk's strength does take its toll on Bakugo's body, and repetitive use within a short time can tire out his arms and hands. But not even those limitations stop Bakugo from making the most of his quirk, and its fierce power makes it one of the strongest quirks we've ever seen. At number 6, we have Half Cold, Half Hot. This quirk, wielded by Shouto Todoroki, is a hybrid between his mother's ice powers and his father's fire powers, and it's just as threatening as it sounds. Not only does it make Todoroki invulnerable to attacks that weaken one side of his powers, but it's essentially 2 powers in one, giving him twice as many abilities than most, and ranking him higher than Bakugo on this list despite losing to him in the sports festival. Todoroki has impressive control over his ice powers, able to create large walls of ice both as defense and offense, and freeze his opponents. Though he uses his fire less than his ice side and is less skilled at controlling it, the force of the flames that he can create is still something to watch out for and could even be more effective than Bakugo's explosion. When it comes to raw power, Half Cold, Half Hot is one that needs no lengthy explanation. Both sides may even be used at the same time, though probably not at the same level of power when used separately. However, a disadvantage that comes with this adaptable quirk is overuse. If one side is used more than the other, it could cause frostbite or overheating, depending on which side. Todoroki must constantly regulate his own body's temperature between hot and cold to make sure that they're equal, though the fact that he has both ice and fire powers does present another advantage in that he can cool himself off or heat himself up at will if he needs to. Still, like with Bakugo, an ability as overpowered as this must take a toll on its user, and Todoroki is always in danger of overexerting himself if he uses too much of one or both sides. Still, with enough training and finesse, there's no doubt that Todoroki could surpass even his own father as a pro hero one day. And speaking of Todoroki's pro hero dad, as we enter our top 5, we have Hellflame, wielded by the pro hero Enji Todoroki, or more commonly known as Endeavor. While similar to Todoroki's own firepower, Endeavor's is the originator and far more destructive than its successor. With full control of his abilities, functions, and able to wield it to its maximum capacity, there's no doubt as to why Endeavor was second only to All Might and is now the #1 hero. Endeavor is not only able to cover himself in flames without burning himself, but he's able to change his flame's temperature and use them to burn and incinerate his enemies, even to the point of turning his flames blue. Compared to his son's abilities, Endeavor's is overwhelmingly stronger, as he can easily overpower his enemies and use the extreme heat of his flames to make ashes out of his opponents. There is just nothing quite like raw strength to get the job done, and Endeavor does it flawlessly. But much like Shoto's own weaknesses, overuse of his own abilities can wear him out, such as after he uses his most powerful move, Flash Fire. But as a professional hero who's been in the business for longer than any of the previous entries on this list, Endeavor has experience on his side, and he's able to regulate and control the power of his attacks to ultimately emerge the winner from any fight. With little to no drawbacks to his extremely effective quirk, Endeavor easily makes the top of the list, with only a scant few quirks able to compete. Which brings us to our number 4, Rewind. Easily one of the most overpowered quirks in the entire series, Rewind is used by Eri, a little girl who is rescued by Midoriya and Mirio Togata. This quirk is able to rewind any person to a previous state. Anyone affected by Rewind can have their bodies reverted to a previous physical state, such as before they had gotten an injury, altering their body to look like a past form. In the most extreme case, Rewind is even able to turn people back to a point where they never even existed. The full capabilities of the quirk have yet to be explored, but even with just the few scenes we've seen so far, Rewind is truly a terrifying and overpowering ability that can be devastating in the hands of the wrong people. Rewind has the potential to even be the most overpowered quirk we've ever seen, but because its user Eri is still young and unable to fully control it, it's ranked lower on this list than what first impressions of it might suggest. But there's no denying how great of a power Rewind is, and how dangerous it can be. With equal potential to be used for good or for evil, even in its pure, unpolished form, Rewind is a rare and astounding quirk that earns its place among the most powerful quirks ever seen. Moving on to our top 3, we have One for All, wielded by none other than our own green-haired protagonist, Midoriya Yuzuko, and his mentor, All Might. One for All is a combination of 2 quirks. 1, a stockpiling quirk that gathers and stockpiles power in the user, and 2, a quirk that is able to transfer itself onto other people. One for All grows stronger and stronger with each user that it's imparted to, having a total of 9 users so far, including Midoriya. Each user's strength is passed on to the next users, and so on and so forth, stacking up to make one of the most powerful quirks in existence. In the hands of All Might, One for All was strong enough to make him the #1 hero for a successive number of years, enhancing his physical strength and even his appearance greatly. By all intents and purposes, a quirk that only ever gets stronger and stronger with time should be the most overpowered quirk. However, as we've seen when Midoriya inherited its power in the very beginning of the series, mastering One for All takes a significant toll on its user's body. Usage of the quirk doesn't come as easily as inheriting it does, and the next user has to undergo intense training before they can wield its power effectively. We can't count the times Midoriya has injured himself trying to use One for All to its full power, and he hasn't really been able to reach its maximum potential quite yet. With All Might, One for All was strong enough to go toe-to-toe with the best of the best, but with our young Midoriya, it's still got a long way to go before he can make the power his own. But regardless of the inexperience of its current user, One for All, even in its weakest embers, is still able to hold its own against some of the most intimidating villains in the series, and it deserves a spot at the top of our list. Coming in at number 2, we have Overhaul, which is both the name of the quirk and the alias of its user, Kai Chisaki. Overhaul allows its user to instantaneously take apart anything he touches, similar to Tomura Shigeraki's quirk Decay. But unlike Decay, Overhaul also has the ability to reconstruct matter into any form as long as Kai is able to touch his target with even just one finger. Kai is able to control how much he wants to take something apart, and he can control what to turn them into. This allows him to create obstacles for his opponents, hide evidence of his presence, and change the terrain of any battlefield. But the most sinister thing about this quirk is that it doesn't just work on non-living things. Anything that Kai touches, including other people, can be deconstructed and reconstructed to his liking, and they even can be combined with other things or other people to make it stronger, such as when Kai combines himself with Shin Nemoto and Rikiya Katsukame to take on a stronger and more monstrous form. And as if that's not overkill enough, Kai is even able to use the quirks of anyone that he's fused with. This guy could very well be the very definition of overpowered. In fact, he's so OP that really the only way to stop him is to restrain his arms and get close enough to incapacitate him before he incapacitates you. It takes another overpowered quirk, Rewind, to really beat him for good, and the battles against Overhaul remains one of the longest and most memorable fights in the series. As far as overpowered villains go, Overhaul takes the cake, but he's really only second to our number 1 pick. And finally, our number 1. Beating every other quirk by a huge margin is All for One. What, after all, can beat every single other quirk in the world other than multiple quirks all at once? As its name suggests, All for One is a quirk that steals other people's quirks to serve its user, rendering the previous owner of the stolen quirks quirkless. All for One is able to use all these quirks all at once, even simultaneously. He has a tremendous amount of abilities at his disposal, all gathered from different people over the years. And with such overwhelming power and unpredictability, it's no wonder that All for One has distinguished himself as the most powerful villain to have ever lived. To get a handle on just how invincible All for One is, multiple users of One for All have gone up against him in the past, and none of them have ever really been able to take him down. Even All Might, battling with the last embers of One for All, just barely scrapes by in our face-off against All for One. If you thought facing off against any of the other previous entries on our list was unfair, being pitted solo against All for One is the epitome of power and balance. It's enough to really make him inhuman, and it's nothing short of a miracle when he's finally captured and taken into custody. But he isn't the symbol of evil for nothing, and with no real way of knowing exactly how many or what kind of quirks he has, we wouldn't count All for One out of the game just yet. And there you have it, our top 10 list of the most overpowered quirks in My Hero Academia. But the story of My Hero Academia is far from over, with still plenty of unreleased chapters up ahead and possibly many new characters that have yet to make their debut. Even more powerful quirks could be waiting for us in the future. Just as MHA's creator Horikoshi Kohei ups the ante with every new arc, so can we be sure that this isn't the last we'll see of some of these characters. With each new development in the plot, so do the characters grow and develop new techniques and ways to bring out the most in each of their quirks. And with most of the cast being only students after all, who knows just how far they'll go once they awaken their maximum potential and wield their quirks with mastery and pride. As we wait for the next season of My Hero Academia, you can keep getting your fix of My Hero content by checking out our last top 10 video, My Hero Academia Villains from Evil to Evil Incarnate, where we rank each the My Hero Universe baddies from petty to pure evil. Check out the link at the end of the video to see where your favorite villain placed. Thanks for watching. This is Cosplay-FTW plus Ultra.